Until yesterday, this garden looked like the weeds had taken over. Large crabgrass was packed densely between the ridges, and horsetail was standing tall next to the pepper seedlings. It was the kind of field where you'd feel overwhelmed just thinking about how many times you'd have to bend your back with a hoe. But when I went out again this morning, those weeds that were so vibrant yesterday were dried up and white. Not even 24 hours had passed. I didn't use a single drop of herbicide. It wasn't a special pesticide or an expensive chemical. What I used was a very familiar ingredient easily found in a kitchen cupboard or a grocery store. Those who have gardened for a long time will know. Weeding doesn't end with pulling them once. If you pull them today, they come up again next week, and if it rains once, grass that wasn't there yesterday covers the ridges again. As you bend over to pull them, get dirt under your fingernails and tug at the roots, a thought eventually crosses your mind. I don't know if I'm growing vegetables or weeds. Especially for gardeners in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, weeds are not just a nuisance. They are the most realistic problem that torments the back and knees. However, there is one fact we must know. Even at this moment, countless weed seeds are dormant within 1 square meter of your garden soil. Experts call this a seed bank. You just can't see them. The next generation of weeds is already waiting in the soil. Therefore, pulling weeds by hand is just removing the weeds that have appeared before your eyes, not removing the structure itself where weeds continue to emerge. It's like temporarily stopping a cold cough while leaving the cause inside the body. That's why weed management doesn't end with just pulling. You need to know how to kill them, how to prevent them from coming up, and how to do it without ruining the soil. Still, I don't want to use chemical herbicides right away. This is a garden where lettuce, peppers, cucumbers, and tomatoes for the family to eat are growing. Many people feel uncomfortable spraying strong chemical components on the soil of a garden. They started to get healthy food. Of course, commercial herbicides are powerful. However, for those who cultivate a garden as a hobby and grow vegetables for their children and grandchildren to eat, a gentler method, a method using the principles of nature, is needed. The method I'm going to tell you today is for those people. It's a way to quickly dry out weeds using familiar ingredients from the kitchen without pesticides or expensive products, and furthermore, to create a garden structure where fewer weeds come up. Today's story doesn't just end with spraying vinegar kills weeds. I will explain in order why vinegar dries out weeds, why regular vinegar has a weak effect, why it should be sprayed on a clear day at noon, why you must be absolutely careful on windy days, and what ingredients to add to vinegar to multiply the effect. Also, I will summarize not only the attack method that ends with one spray, but also prevention strategies like the stale seedbed, 2-layer mulching, and living mulch that make it difficult for weeds to emerge in the first place. If you listen to today's content until the end, the time spent pulling grass this summer will definitely decrease. First, you must understand the principle of how vinegar withers and kills weeds. Many people think of vinegar simply as a sour seasoning. However, vinegar contains a component called acetic acid. When this acetic acid touches the surface of a weed leaf, it affects the plant cell membrane. The plant cell membrane acts like a fence that distinguishes the inside from the outside and protects the moisture and nutrients inside the cell. But when acetic acid shakes this fence, the cell can no longer hold on to moisture properly. Simply put, the water inside the leaf begins to leak out. This process is similar to how water comes out when you sprinkle salt on cabbage when making kimchi. Just as the cabbage loses its crispness, the leaves of weeds quickly wither as they lose moisture. If strong sunlight shines here, the leaked moisture evaporates even faster. So weed leaves dry white sag and lose strength within a few hours. This is neither magic nor a coincidence. It is a very natural reaction that plant tissue cannot withstand after losing water. There is one important advantage here. The acetic acid in fermented vinegar is decomposed by microorganisms in the soil over time. It is different from the method of chemical herbicides that remain for a long time and continue to affect crops and soil. Of course, that doesn't mean you can spray it anywhere in large quantities. Since vinegar is also acidic, if it enters the soil repeatedly and in large amounts, it can temporarily lower the soil pH. However, if you spray it accurately only on the leaves and do not repeat it excessively, it can be used as a weeding method with relatively little burden in the garden. The important things are the exact target, the exact concentration, and the exact weather. Then why was the effect weak when you sprayed regular vinegar sold at the mart? The reason is concentration. Usually regular brewed vinegar used in the kitchen has a low acetic acid concentration. It may be too weak to break down the cell membranes of weeds fast enough. Especially if the sunlight is weak or there is moisture on the leaf surface, the acetic acid is diluted or evaporates, and it often ends with the weeds just withering a little. In many cases, they come back to life after a few days. That's why some people say, I tried vinegar, but it wasn't very effective. It's not that vinegar doesn't work, but that the concentration and conditions were not right. For garden weeding, it is better to use triple-strength vinegar rather than regular vinegar. Triple-strength vinegar has a high acetic acid concentration, so it acts much faster when it touches the surface of weed leaves. You can easily find it at large marts or online under names like triple-strength apple cider vinegar or triple-strength brewed vinegar. If it's a small garden, you can sufficiently test it with 1.8-liter bottle, and if it's a large field, you can significantly reduce costs by purchasing in bulk. The important thing is not to dilute it by adding a lot of water. If you dilute it, the acetic acid concentration drops accordingly, and the effect also decreases. However, there is something I must warn you about here. Do not use glacial acetic acid. Some of you may have seen posts saying you can use glacial acetic acid diluted in water. However, glacial acetic acid is a very high concentration acetic acid and is a dangerous substance that can cause strong irritation to the skin and eyes. What we want to use in the garden is fermented vinegar, not industrial high concentration acetic acid. If you choose a dangerous substance because the price is cheap, it becomes the exact opposite of the purpose of creating a healthy garden. Safety comes first in the garden. Be sure to think based on the fermented vinegar series used as food. Now that we know the basic principle of vinegar, we need to look at the next problem. There is a protective barrier on the surface of weed leaves that is not easily seen by our eyes. It is the cuticle layer. The reason the leaves are shiny and the reason water droplets roll off the leaves when it rains is because of this thin wax layer. From the plant's perspective, it's a good coating that protects itself, but when we spray vinegar, this coating gets in the way. It's as if the weeds are wearing raincoats. If the vinegar cannot stay on the leaves for long and flows down, the effect decreases. The ingredient that weakens this protective barrier is ethanol. You can easily get rubbing alcohol at a pharmacy or online. Ethanol has the property of dissolving the wax layer, helping the vinegar touch the leaf surface better. When vinegar and ethanol are used together, the speed at which acetic acid penetrates the weed leaves becomes faster than when only triple-strength vinegar is sprayed. The amount used doesn't have to be much. About 30 milliliters of ethanol for 2 liters of triple-strength vinegar is enough. It's an amount less than one shot glass. The purpose is not to kill the weeds with ethanol, but to help the vinegar stick better and permeate better. The order of mixing is also important. First, put the triple-strength vinegar in the sprayer, then add the ethanol and shake slowly to mix. Since ethanol is highly volatile and flammable, you should not work near a gas stove or fire. Be sure to prepare outside where ventilation is good, and do not leave the lid open for a long time. If you follow small safety rules, you can use it without difficulty, but if you handle it carelessly, it can be dangerous. Just because it's a natural ingredient doesn't mean you can use it any way you want. It is important to use it accurately in a safe way. Now you need to know the spraying principles. Even if you use the same vinegar and ethanol, the results will vary greatly if the weather and time are not right. The first principle is to spray on a clear day. After the vinegar weakens the cell membrane, the sunlight must quickly evaporate the moisture for the weeds to dry out surely. On cloudy days, the leaves dry slowly and the effect is weak. The second principle is to spray during the day after the morning dew has completely dried. If dew remains, the vinegar is diluted. If the concentration drops, the weeds can survive. You must choose a time when the weed leaves are dry and the sunlight is strong. The third principle is to avoid windy days. Vinegar is not a medicine that selectively kills only weeds. Any plant it touches, whether it's a vegetable or a weed, can damage its leaves. If it splashes on the leaves of peppers, lettuce, cucumbers, or tomatoes, those crops can also be damaged. Therefore, on a quiet day without wind, you must spray accurately and low only on the weed leaves. The fourth principle is to check the rain forecast. If it rains within a few hours after spraying, the vinegar will be washed away. It is better to choose a day when it will not rain for at least a day. A clear day after the dew has dried, a windless day, and a day without rain. Just by following these four, the effect will increase significantly. However, you must also clearly know the limitations of the vinegar weeding method. Vinegar is a contact-type weeding method. It has a fast effect on the parts it touches, such as leaves and stems, but its power to directly kill deep roots is weak. For young annual weeds like crabgrass and foxtail, one time is enough to see the effect. However, for weeds with deep and strong roots like horsetail, Japanese hop, and thistle, they may come up again after a few days, even if the above-ground parts dry up. For these weeds, a strategy of repeated treatment or removing the roots after weakening the above-ground parts with vinegar is necessary. You need to know the expectations accurately so you can use it properly without being disappointed. This is the attack method to dry out weeds. But to create a truly comfortable garden, you must move away from the method of fighting every time weeds come up. Better than killing weeds is making it difficult for weeds to come up at all. As mentioned earlier, countless weed seeds are dormant in the soil. When the sunlight, temperature, and moisture are right, these seeds wake up again. So a prevention strategy is needed. Today, you just need to remember three things: stale seedbed, two-layer mulching, and living mulch. The first is the stale seedbed. This is a method of intentionally preparing the field and watering it 2 to 4 weeks before planting crops to sprout weed seeds. When the weeds come up about 2 centimeters to 3 centimeters, you spray vinegar or shallowly scrape them with a hoe to remove them. Then, you can plant crops after pre-exhausting the first group of weed seeds that were near the soil surface. This method is an old technique used even by professional farmers. If you take the time just once before planting crops, the occurrence of weeds thereafter is greatly reduced. It may seem a bit cumbersome for garden beginners, but considering the time spent pulling grass all summer, it is much more beneficial. The second is two-layer mulching. Weed seeds need light to sprout. If you create a cover that blocks light on the soil, weeds will come up much less. The most realistic way is to use cardboard and organic mulch together. Spread out delivery boxes and lay them on the soil, then cover them with materials like rice straw, fallen leaves, or wood chips about 8 centimeters to 10 centimeters thick. The cardboard blocks the light, and the organic matter on top maintains moisture, and over time, both become organic matter in the soil. Unlike plastic mulching, it doesn't remain as trash later and makes the soil softer and richer. This method is especially good for the spaces between ridges and empty spaces between crops. Weeds cannot come up, the soil dries out less, and muddy water splashes less even when it rains. It also helps crops like peppers, tomatoes, and cucumbers, where diseases are likely to spread through soil water splashing. However, if you put the mulch too close to the stem, ventilation is blocked and moisture is likely to build up, so it is better to leave some space around the stem. Make the mulch thick, but leave breathing holes for the crops. This is the basic of a long-lasting garden. The third is living mulch. This is a method of planting low-growing plants like white clover in the empty spaces between crops to reduce the chance for weeds to enter. White clover covers the ground densely and also has the ability to fix nitrogen with root nodule bacteria. So you can expect weed suppression and soil improvement at the same time. However, it is not necessarily suitable for all fields. Since competition for water and nutrients may occur, it is better to use it mainly in passages and empty spaces rather than planting it too densely near crops. Crops that cover the ground with large leaves like pumpkins or zucchini also help suppress weeds. Now I must also mention the principles of protecting the soil. Vinegar is a natural ingredient, but if you spray it too often and too much in the same place, it can be a burden on the soil. If acetic acid enters the soil can temporarily become acidified, and microbial activity can also decrease. Of course, it decomposes and recovers over time, but since the garden is a place to grow food, you must use it carefully. First, spray vinegar on the weed leaves, not the soil. Second, limit it to 2 to 3 times per season in the same place. Third, after 2 to 3 weeks of spraying, supplement with a little compost or organic matter to help the microorganisms recover. This way, you can protect both the weeding effect and soil health. However, for strong weeds with deep roots like horsetail or Japanese hop, vinegar and ethanol alone may not be enough. These weeds come up again with the strength remaining in the roots, even if the above-ground parts are dried. At this time, there is a strong combination you can use. It is the method of mixing triple-strength vinegar, salt, and natural dish soap. However, this combination is not a method to be sprayed all over a general garden. Because salt is included, you must choose the place of use very carefully. It is safe to use it limitedly in passages, between stones, under fences, and on weeds away from crop roots, rather than inside the ridges where crops grow. In this combination, salt takes away the moisture of weed cells faster and seeps into the soil a little to interfere with the root's moisture absorption. So you can expect a longer-lasting effect than vinegar alone. Natural dish soap breaks the wax layer on the leaf surface and helps the vinegar and salt water stick to the leaves better. Vinegar weakens the cell membrane and dries it quickly. Because the three act in different ways, the effect can be greater on strong weeds. The mixing is simple. Add 100 grams of salt to 1 liter of triple-strength vinegar and dissolve it completely. Then add 5 milliliters of natural dish soap, about 1 small spoonful, and mix gently. The order is important. If you put the soap in first, a lot of bubbles will form, making it inconvenient to handle. Be sure to dissolve the salt in the vinegar first and then add the soap at the end. It is better not to add water. If you add water, the concentration lowers and the effect decreases. Put it in a sprayer and spray it carefully only on the weed leaves. However, you must be careful with combinations containing salt. Salt does not decompose as quickly as vinegar. It can remain in the soil and interfere with the growth of newly planted crops. Therefore, use it only once or twice a season in the same place. Do not use it in a place where you will soon plant crops. Use it only at least 30 centimeters away from crop roots. Especially, you must be careful not to let it fly around peppers, lettuce, cucumbers, and tomatoes. The principle is to use the strong combination only on strong weeds, only where needed, and accurately. In summary, you can distinguish it like this. For young crabgrass, foxtail, and small soft annual weeds, a combination of triple-strength vinegar and ethanol is enough. For strong enemies with deep roots that come up again, like horsetail, Japanese hop, and thistle, use a combination of salt and natural dish soap limitedly. And no matter what method you use, you must use stale seedbed, 2-layer mulching, and living mulch together. A person who sprays every time weeds come up is busy all summer. A person who creates a structure where it is difficult for weeds to come up can look after the garden much more comfortably. Now think about your garden. Does horsetail come up in the same spot every year? Does crabgrass cover the space between the pepper ridges? Are you tired of pulling small grasses next to the lettuce by hand? If so, try changing the method this year. First, accurately spray the vinegar combination on the weed leaves on a clear day. Then, clean up the dead weeds and cover the spaces between the ridges with cardboard and rice straw. In empty spaces, use white clover or large leaf crops to prevent light from directly touching the soil. And supplement the soil with compost and organic matter to keep the microorganisms alive. This completely changes the way you fight weeds. Weeds are not the enemy. They are just plants growing in a place they think is their spot. The problem is that the spot is where we want to grow vegetables. So, rather than unconditionally hating them, you should strategically think about where to prevent them from growing, where to weaken them, and where to block the light. A garden is a space for management, not a battlefield. If you have the right tools, timing, and prevention structure, the time spent bending your back to fight grass every week will decrease. In that time, we can look after the vegetables, touch the soil, and enjoy the harvest. Let's summarize today's content one last time. First, the reason weeds keep coming up is that countless seeds are dormant in the soil. Second, the acetic acid in vinegar weakens the cell membranes of weed leaves and takes away moisture to dry them quickly. Third, triple-strength vinegar is more effective than regular vinegar, and glacial acetic acid is dangerous, so do not use it. Fourth, ethanol weakens the wax layer on the leaf surface and helps the penetration of vinegar. Fifth, you must choose a clear day, a day after the dew has dried, a windless time, and a day without rain. Sixth, since vinegar is a contact type, repeated treatment or a strong combination may be necessary for deep-rooted weeds. Seventh, the real key is to make weeds come up less with stale seed beds, two-layer mulching, and living mulch. Eighth, the golden combination containing salt should be used limitedly only on strong weeds and avoided around crops and places to be newly planted. What you need to do today is not difficult. Check if there is triple-strength vinegar in your kitchen cupboard. If not, prepare one the next time you go grocery shopping. When a delivery box comes, don't throw it away, unfold it. It becomes an excellent mulching material to cover the spaces between the ridges. Also, collect rice straw, wood chips, and fallen leaves. The best way to get rid of weeds is to block the light that allows them to sprout. One small preparation greatly reduces the labor of summer. Don't give up on your garden this summer because of weeds. Instead of a field where your back hurts from pulling grass, try to create a field where the soil is alive and the vegetables breathe. Even without relying on chemical herbicides or expensive equipment, if you know the principles of nature, weed management can become much easier. If this story changed the way you look at the weeds in your garden, please subscribe to our channel and like this video. We are excavating the history they tried to bury. Let's plant the future. The next treasure will open soon. Also, please leave a comment about which weed is the most troublesome in your garden. Whether it's horsetail, crabgrass, or Japanese hop, let's talk about it together. Next time, I will return with practical methods to manage your garden healthily without pesticides.